Hi, my name is Lindsey and I am the host of the Loud Girl Who Reads podcast. Today we're going to be talking about what is the best genre of books. And then also in that, what is my favorite genre, and do I think that escapism has become too much with books, as well as a reading and writing update, and much more yet to come. So this is the 4th episode. I'm still keeping going. I don't know how I'm doing it, but you know what? We're just gonna say it's all God and hope that I can still do this. Now, the last one I did, which was episode 3, I wasn't able to upload it onto YouTube, so I don't know how it would do onto YouTube yet. I want to upload it probably about the same time this one will come out. It will be uploaded. But on Spotify, the 3rd episode has done the best that any of the episodes have done thus far. So let's make 4 a record breaker, right? Let's keep on that cycle. Now, what you would deem as success probably isn't the same as what I would deem as success, but for right now, I'm pretty happy with my listens so far, and I want to be able to monetize this one day, get better stuff, turn it into something maybe. But jumping straight into this, I asked TikTok and Reddit what their favorite genre of books are and why. Because I know for me, I have a very specific genre that I prefer, but then also I know that I am the type of person who I've always said that I'll read any kind of book as long as it has a good twist, if it has a good ending. And I've kind of adjusted that, like I'll read some feel-good ones and this, that, and the other, but that's my main thing. If it's got a good twist in it, doesn't matter what genre it is. Now I will say, still read it only if it's clean, but I just think a good twist is what makes a book. So let's see what TikTok and Reddit had to say. Again, so what is your favorite genre of books and why? That's what I asked TikTok and Reddit, and here are just some of the answers. Now for this one, I got more answers than I ever have on a question on Reddit. I got, I believe, 41 submissions. Now I am not going to use all of them. Typically I use a good 90% of the ones I get, with some slight editing to take out certain things to make it a little shorter. But for the most part, I use almost every single one. And I also had a problem with TikTok this week where I kept going to copy the answer to be able to put it into my, little thing, and it would delete it. I would they're right next to each other, the copy and the delete button. So if your comment got deleted, I am so sorry. It was just a mess up on my end. I know a couple people's had that happen. But here are some of the answers. So I got romantasy, which I personally love some good romantasy. I got someone else who said thrillers and mystery and any kind of dark fantasy. I've just always loved these genres because they're similar to what I read as a kid. So if I had to guess, now this is just a guess, I don't know this person, they probably grew up on Goosebumps. I know that a lot of people did because, there were so many of them, they caught their attention, they were topics that weren't really, overdone at the time, though they might be now. And so, it has a different draw to it, or at least it did at the time. Now I feel like there's Goosebumps everything. There's, 2 movies. I know there's 2 TV shows on it. And I think it's just a little overdone. I think they could have expanded on it in a different way, maybe turning some of the episodes into movies themselves, giving them more stories. But instead, I feel like they reused the ideas. In the new show, I don't even think I even tried to watch it. The old show's pretty decent, though. So the next answer I'll be reading is, someone said, I love psychological thrillers and enemies to lovers books. Probably because I'm a little crazy, and also because I love a good bully romance. I love the fact that the person just had to note that they're a little crazy. Now, personally, psychological thrillers are one of my favorite things to watch and read, because if I can't think about this movie in all of its entirety, or think about the book, then I'm going to get distracted. I have to be doing something while I'm watching a movie most times, but if it's a psychological thriller, then it makes me stop because I can only think about that. And if I'm going to sit down to watch a movie, I would much rather have something that's like that than have one that's super fast-paced, hard to keep up with, or really, really slow and hard to keep your full attention, So I'd rather have one that's a psychological thriller that makes you think. Now, as far as a good bully romance, I don't even know. It depends on the context. Because, playful banter is like the cutest thing on planet Earth. I love it in books and sometimes movies. Movies are usually a little too cheesy for me, but whenever I'm by myself and I'm reading a book and they've got good banter, then I will laugh my head off. I will read it and I'll be consumed in the book. Now, in real life, I will say, the first thing I thought about whenever I heard a good bully romance was that I am the bullier and I'm the bully in my relationship, but I see things differently than my boyfriend does. I will say that because, okay, whenever I do like a playful little like I hit him or like I punch him, that's me showing affection. I don't know how that works, but that's me because I wouldn't do that to someone that I wouldn't trust. Like if I were to like, not hard, but like punch a friend and they were like, what are you doing? Like, do you want to fight or something? Like, that wouldn't give me the same effect. But if I were to punch someone and like they kind of like shrug it off or whatever, that means that they're accepting how I love them, which I'm not saying that you should hurt people as a love language. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think it kind of fits in with like the physical touch kind of thing. And if I can joke around with you and it's okay, then I will go ham. And like, it does come off a little harsh sometimes. Sometimes I make some not good jokes and I want to, do better about that, not being as harsh. Again, I think I said in the last video that I'm trying to learn to be more gentle with just everything. But I would definitely call myself the bully of my relationship. So, just moving straight on. So, someone else said, I go through phases. I went through a nonfiction phase where I read a lot of true crime and social justice and memoirs. My sci-fi phase, I read all of, I think all of Bradbury's, which is a feat in itself. My fiction phase / action type books you can read in a day or two. Right now, I just finished a book about a serial killer and I have to decide what to read next. So that's like a whole thing. I think they just like true crime. Because you can read about like actual true crime. Now, it's bizarre that I'm using the word true crime when you can read actual crime that's true crime, or you can read about fake. And so I think they just really like the crime aspect because it does give you a little bit of a thrill to read about it. I know one of my favorite books, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, that really got me into reading was, a psychological thriller that had a little bit of crime into it, and it twisted my brain, and it probably wasn't that big of a twist. I had someone else read it, and they were like, it wasn't that big of a twist. It's not that big of a deal. But for me, whenever I actually listened to it through an audiobook, it rocked my world, and that always gets me. Someone said thriller because I'm a fan of suspense. That also applies to movies and TV shows. And their least favorite is romance because they said it was too predictable. Which, it is too predictable. Most of the time, a romance book is not meant to be something that twists and turns. I'm not saying that there can't be it, but if you are sitting down to read a romance book and it does too much twisting and turning, then it's not fulfilling its goal. In my opinion. Because if I'm sitting down now, I, again, only read clean, so I'm not reading any kind of, like, erotic or anything. But if I'm sitting down to read a clean little sweet romance book, I don't want it to be like that. I don't want to have to think too much. I want to just enjoy it. I want it to be just like a sweet little, a little fling. Like a summer fling type thing. Like, I wouldn't want something that's, like, super crazy. Otherwise, it's not doing its job of just giving me the enjoyment of reading about it, Like, it's not the same, like, I don't read a romance for the same reason why I would read a thriller book. And so if you don't like that genre, just don't read it. Yes, it is predictable, but that's the goal. So someone else said that they're pretty new to Reddit, which is where I had put it in. But they also answered the question, saying that theirs is probably leaning into the more dystopian science fiction stuff, which I love. They said, I don't know, it makes me feel a sense of comfort, despite it being dystopian, which usually presents itself in a melancholic, post-apocalyptic universe stuff. 1984 being my favorite so far. Pretty interested to know what y'all's recommendations are, because I also want to try writing in the same genre. Which I feel like once, especially with dystopian books, once you get hooked on something that you really like a genre that you really like, it's almost impossible to not feel the urge to write in that specific type. Like, I will say the book that I'm writing right now is a, not dystopian, but it's like a very YA book, which my other books have been YA, but they have been more, dystopian or like Chronicles of Narnia. But this one is very, very YA, which is one of my favorite types of books to read. And so once you get entranced in like a certain type of book, you just can't leave it. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that for right now. So someone else said fantasy in all kinds. I love mythology, paranormal, high fantasy, everything. The world building is always very lively, and I love being absorbed by the story. It feels more like you're immersed in it when you're not dealing with daily stuff like in contemporary, which they said they also enjoy. Sometimes I just want to live in a different world for a while. Which, I get that. Fantasy is one of the only types of books that you can fully get immersed in. Now, I'm not saying that you can't read, a good romance where you feel like you're the main character, a good, even nonfiction book where you feel like you've, shared whatever the person had been going through. You feel like you can share that pain. I'm not saying that, but fantasy is the easiest, in my opinion, to actually get fully, you actually feel like you're in that world. Someone else said, absolutely any kind of romance, fantasy, dark, etc. I really enjoy reading romance because it always makes me feel fuzzy inside, even though most of the time they're all predictable. Again, like I said, you read a romance book for it to be predictable. That's part of the draw to it. You don't want to have to think. You don't want it to be something super crazy. You just want to sit and enjoy it. Oh, I lost my place. Oh, but I guess that's what I love about them. I also enjoy thrillers. I haven't read as many thrillers as I have romance, but I'd love to find some more to read. But yeah, that just proves my point. I read like 20% of the actual comment and then I put it in here, and my reaction is honestly genuine. Like, I don't really screen, like I kind of browse through, read it, and I'm like, oh, that seems like it would be a good one to throw in. So I'm actually answering these. I haven't pre-answered them in my head. The last one I'm going to read is, I usually read nonfiction. I went through a phase of reading a lot of novels, but now I rarely do. So it's quite a lot of autobiographies, politics, history, mythology, all that boring stuff, which is actually not boring at all, but people think it is. For me personally, I cannot get into nonfiction books. I have read one nonfiction book my entire life that I have actually enjoyed, and it's the book Captivating by Stacey and John Eldridge. The only nonfiction book that I can read, and that's because it was truly fascinating. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't other books out there that could catch my eye and be really interesting, but that was the only one that I actually was able to stick through. It was a very good book, and I would suggest it to any woman who just wants to know why women are the way they are, and how you were created and how that makes a difference. I would definitely suggest it to you, and there's also a male counterpart, Wild at Heart. Both of them, my boyfriend's read the other. Both of them are very good books. I would suggest those books to people. But if someone were to suggest to me a nonfiction book, I'd probably say, yeah, that sounds like a great book, but it's not really my style. Usually I stick to fiction, fantasy, whatever. Because I just cannot get invested into it. Like, I can put all my effort into it, and I feel like I'm falling asleep right in front of the book. Like, I just can't do it. Now, they said that it's not boring to them, which is good for them, because I personally can't. I just can't. I probably could try harder, but why? Because I've made this point before. Like, yes, you can read outside of your comfort zone, you can read things, for learning, but I know that for me personally, and I know a lot of people feel this way, I'm just gonna go ahead and let this bleed straight into my next thing, which is the escapism of books. You're not reading all the time to learn something. Most of the time you're reading to enjoy it. And that's part of the reason why I don't read spicy books, because that would take the enjoyment out of it for me. If I'm having to skip through part of the storyline because it doesn't fit with my beliefs, then that ruins it for me. I want to read books that I enjoy. And yes, that does mean DNFing books, which if you don't know what that means, it means did not finish. So if you DNF a book, it means that you did not finish it and you just stopped it however far through. And sometimes that's an okay thing. And I listened to this one video, I wasn't necessarily watching it as much, that it was a woman that I follow on TikTok, and she was talking about, if you are a book reviewer, too, like if you're the type of person who, like, every book that you finish, you put on Goodreads, you give it a review, and you go to read a book, and yes, it's outside of your comfort zone, but you're going to give it a chance, and you are just not liking it, it's okay. It wasn't meant for you, obviously, and it's okay not to like a book. But that also means that if it wasn't meant for you, if it's not your style, but other people like it, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to dash the entire thing just because it didn't fit you. Now, if it was, say, like they had grammar problems, they, used improper tenses at times, it was confusing, that would be one thing. But if you're disliking a book simply because it's not in your typical genre and it's not your cup of tea, then why post about that? Why make an effort to go against? Because that's what they were going for. Like, if I read a romance book, like I said, they're predictable. That's how they're supposed to be. Like, I don't think that there's a problem with non-predictable, like, unpredictable, not me creating words, unpredictable romance books. But if you're reading a romance book and you know that most times they're pretty predictable, and you typically read thriller books, and you go to leave a review and you're like, it was too predictable, blah, blah, blah. That was the point. And so if you're trying to make it into a negative way so that people don't read it, I just feel like there's no need, because it obviously wasn't made for you. It was made for the people like me who love the predictable romance books, who love how it is, because then you don't have to think. And that is a type of an escapism where you don't really have to think about what you're reading. You could just read it and enjoy it. And there is good sides and bad sides to the whole, like, you could just escape into a world. And I even have a lot on my website in different things that I do that I want you to be able to escape into a different world through my books. Because there are times when that's the case, there are times where it's okay to, find yourself in a book and to just deal that way. I've personally done that where, like, you're going through a hard time and so you read as a kind of, some people watch TV to, like, watch another person. You're almost living it if you're reading a book to escape. And, I think that there's also a very unhealthy side of it where people will use books as a way to not deal with their problems. I am not for that. Now, I can say that I put, that on my website, that you'd be able to escape into my books, that you'd be able to live out another world, because it's fun. If you were doing that as a way of fun, on occasion, because I love reading, but once reading becomes anything that becomes a unhealthy habit or an unhealthy coping mechanism, which reading can be, depending on how you do it, then I'm not for it. Because if you are only able to cope with your real life through a fake life, then you need to figure things out better. That's just my personal stance on it. Because, like, therapy's for a reason. I know that some people say, like, reading is my therapy, and I can joke about that, and I could have, like, a t-shirt that says that. And you can kind of use it as a way to cope, but I also just think that real life problems need real life solutions, not fake solutions you find in books. Now, again, if it's like a self-help book, if it's like actually one that's meant to help you get through and deal with things, that's one thing. Even my own book, The You Know, that came out this year, that one has heavy topics in it. I had to put a trigger warning at the beginning of it. Never had to do that before. But I wrote it to help people, because I think that there is a relatability with books. Like, if you're reading one about someone going through a specific situation and you're going through it right now, that could help you. And I'm not saying that it couldn't, but if that's the only help that you are searching for, if you don't look anywhere else except for just consuming all of your extra time and, money too into books, then I think that's unhealthy. But going back to the You Know, that one, like I said, I had to put a trigger warning, because I think that books need to be realistic at times, especially Christian books. Now, my books haven't been heavily Christian at times, some of them more so than others. I have 4 books written actually almost 5. Today will probably be 5 books written right now. Now, as of writing more, I feel like I'm putting more of my faith into it. And with You Know specifically, it wasn't overly Christian, but it did focus on the fact that she was broken. Our main character was broken, and she needed help. And she didn't know how to find that, so she just let herself be how she was. And I don't think that's healthy. I think that that's really harmful to us if we just let whatever happens just sit unsettled. Like, just be a constant presence in our life. And even the book that I'm writing right now, I just wrote it yesterday, where one of the main characters, they have this epiphany moment where you realize that they're still back in a situation. Their brain is not in the moment. Their brain is back in a situation they dealt with years ago as a child, because you have to make it in books. To me, sometimes you have to make it so then people can relate to it. Sometimes you have to make it so then the character has to tackle the hard topics because you know that people are having a hard time tackling them in real life. And I think that's one thing that Christian writers need to do more is, write things less, sunshine, rainbows, and more, this is how life really is. Christians don't, we sometimes suffer more than people who decide not to believe in anything, because we have to, deal with the backlash of that, and then also think of, how does this all make sense within, our creator, and then how can we lean on him, and then other people, mocking that belief. And so maybe that's something that Christian authors need to work towards, not being as cheesy and feel good sometimes and being more real. And so just the end of the day, what you read does make a difference on you. I think the Christian writers should focus a little bit more on making things more realistic so that people can relate to it better. I think that people need to, yes, you can find good in books and you can, work through things in books, but I also think that, again, real life problem needs real life solutions, not necessarily a fake world that you can live in from time to time. I think that reading is for enjoyment, and if you don't enjoy it, it's okay, and move on to another book that you can enjoy. So let's go ahead and just jump into a reading and writing update. So this week has been probably my most monumental week for writing that I've ever had. I was talking with a woman last night about my writing because we have been doing these writing sprints. And while I was doing it a couple weeks ago, I was on chapter 2 or 3 of this book. Today, I'm on chapter 42, I believe, and it's crazy how much I've done this week. I think I've done close to 20,000 words. It's been a lot for 1 week, and I've done most of this book that I'm working on, and this book has a different passion towards it. It, again, tackles some harder topics. It's a more romantic-y YA book than, or maybe even new adult book. But I really like how it's going, and I'm really excited for it to get into your hands. Maybe end of this year, maybe even next year, it'll probably be able to buy. But yeah, I definitely like it. As far as reading, I don't think I've read any books this week, except for the Bible, which, if you want to count that. Which, I mean, yes, you can count the Bible. Ugh, that sounds terrible, but you know what I mean, where, it's just, I don't really count it in, my regular, nonfiction reading. Or my regular fiction reading, it's just getting worse. But yeah, I've been reading the Bible, but I haven't been reading regular books, and I probably need to fit a little bit into there. Tonight, I'm going to be going out of town for the night, and hopefully I can get some writing done, and I'll probably finish the book that I'm working on. So I'm very excited, and let's go into a tip to leave you with. Okay, so my tip to leave you with today is to remember that real life problems need real life solutions, and it's okay to escape into a book for, a couple hours or whatever, but don't let it consume your time. Read books that you enjoy, too. Read books that you enjoy. It's okay if you don't like a book. Not everyone, it was meant for that book. If someone didn't like my book, I wouldn't need to know, but it's okay. You don't need to report to the author everything you hated about a book. That doesn't do any help because someone else loved it and it was made for them, So just remember that, and happy reading.